This is a quick reminder that everything is play. Our souls dropped into these bodies as fractals of source, desiring the game of anonymity so that we could find ourselves again. It feels hard to hold that in contrast to how difficult and painful and arduous life seems to be. My name is Megan, and I spent 8 years as an English teacher. Trained in the United States. I come from the state of Georgia. And the first 5 years of my teaching experience, I had the opportunity to move to China. Put a pin in that, because all story is a matter of perspective. But my first 5 years were spent learning how to be a teacher in a place that I did not understand, a place to which I was not native, right? And that was an interesting dichotomy, to be in such a position of a learner while you are literally being paid to teach. At that time, with my American upbringing, teaching, and the same is true in China, teaching holds with it a hierarchical position, a position of superiority, of respect and elevation. And so there's this automatic divide that takes place between teachers who are the knowers and students who are the desiring to know. But I only ended up in China because I couldn't find a job in the United States. When I graduated from college, it was 2011, and the economic crash of 2008 had taken place. But I was a kid. I had no idea what was going on. I was in my own little bubble of higher education. So when I graduated and I started applying for all these hundreds of jobs that were posted on this website, I was ghosted. No one got back to me at all. And I graduated in the top 5% of my class. I had done everything right up to that point, and it never occurred to me that I wouldn't get the thing that I had been working so hard for, which was just a high school teaching position. I'm certified grades 6 through 12 in the state of Georgia, and so I just kept applying. But it turns out that when the economic crash took place, they fired like 25% of Georgia's teachers overnight. And so in 2011, the year that I emerged from UGA, they were rehiring all the teachers that they had fired 3 years before. So they legally had to post these jobs, but I didn't know that. You know, that's behind the scenes stuff. So, yeah, I was working at a restaurant and I was so miserable. It was one of, I've had many dark times since then, but at that time it was the darkest time of my life. And I was like, I can't keep working at a job that I don't like and don't really want to get better at. So I posted my resume on a work abroad website and got hired and swept off. I had never left the country before. At that point, I had no curiosity. I had done my deconstructing from the evangelical church, and I was like, they are liars. The religion is a sham and a mechanism of control. And so I am going to turn my back on religion. I'm going to be a Democrat and be a teacher. And I have done all the work that I need to do on my inner self. LOL. And so all I wanted was to get this job and to teach and to do the 2.5 children and a fence and all that good stuff. So when I went to China, my vision of reality was entirely turned on its head. I went there literally simply because I heard you could make a lot of money teaching abroad, especially in a place with a low cost of living. And I wanted to come back with enough money. I wanted to spend 1 year and come back with enough money to put a down payment on a house. That's it. That's all that I cared about. And then I got there. And the place where I was hired to work wasn't exactly a school. It was more of a training center. But I didn't do my due diligence. I didn't know what I was looking for because I never left the country. I had no idea what I was doing. So I was like, if everything is new, I'm going to trust the first thing that comes to me. Which honestly, kudos to her. She's really brave. She's really brave. She doesn't know she's brave. I'm talking about past Megan. She doesn't know she's brave. She considers herself to be desperate at this point, taking what she can get. But at this point, I am like kind of in awe of her and her resilience and her strength because she took that job and moved to a little town called Juji. It was a district of Shaoxing in central, by latitude, central eastern China. And it was really small. And while I was there, I, as I like to say, had my snow globe shook. I didn't speak the language. I had no idea what to expect. And I was having a really hard time my first week. Because I have to admit, as it turns out, I was sitting on a bench on my day off. I didn't want to spend all day in bed. We didn't have Wi-Fi. We didn't have AC. So I was like, let me just go explore. So I took a little bit of cash and bought some fruit and some nuts at a roadside stand because I didn't have to navigate conversation at that point. I could just scoop stuff into a bag and put it on a scale and hand over enough cash. And I was fucking terrified of looking stupid, which is so funny in a place where you don't know anything. But I sat on a bench and it was a park. It was an pretty empty park. And on this bench, there was a man walking towards me. And he was obviously in the middle of some sort of exercise. Also, the year is 2012. So let's keep that in mind. The year is 2012, and things have changed a lot in 14 years. But this man starts walking towards me, and he's taking these like big, giant strides with his legs. And he's like clapping in front and clapping behind him, doing this like deep breathing with each clap. I sat on that bench and I looked at that man like, you should be so embarrassed. Because I thought he was acting weird. I had never seen someone do that in public before. And it was like, this was one of my earlier spiritual awakenings where I literally heard a voice in my head say, Megan, you're the one who's embarrassed. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm sitting here respectably on this bench just snacking. And the voice said again, listen to your body. Your face is flushed. You are struggling to meet this man's face. Like you're the one looking away. Your heart rate is elevated. Your body is consumed with the physiological response of embarrassment that your cognition believes this man should be experiencing. But look at him. Is he? At this point, I'm like, who the fuck are you? Because I had noticed as soon as like the voice starts pointing out my physiological processes, it wasn't just that my body was experiencing this. I could also tell my eyes were looking around the park for someone else to make eye contact with, to confirm with me that what I was witnessing was strange. And I thought, you're right. Why am I feeling in my body what I think this other person should be experiencing? And in that moment, it was like this lightning bolt of the truth of what judgment is rang true for me. That Bible verse that says, "Judge not lest ye be judged." I always considered it to be a threat of like, if you judge people, one day you're going to get judged. And so like, oh, don't judge people. Like, let people do what people are going to do, because what if? But the simple fact of the matter is, when you judge others, you are literally conjuring inside of your body the physiological responses in an attempt to cast them onto someone else. It's the definition of projection. You're casting it out, but it's your vessel that is doing the lived experience. And so I say that story because this was the first time I had ever unplugged from the American collective consciousness. This judgment that I held against this man for acting strange in public, it didn't impact me at all. When that voice and I kept talking, it was like, how is his behavior harmful? How is his behavior impacting you at all? Whose eyes are you looking to meet in order to corroborate your judgment of his strange behavior? And I was like, I don't fucking know. If I really don't care, if it really doesn't impact me at all, how he moves, how he lives, what was I really looking for by scanning for another pair of eyes? And it made me awaken to this realization that so much of the way we operate inside of the world is based on a series of stories that have been normalized in our place of origin, or just wherever you're living. But I say place of origin because I never really left Georgia. I had left my hometown, but the stories of my upbringing had not left my body. I had turned my back on the church, but the underlying beliefs remained inside of my operating system, just pretty much transferred under a new filter, right? So I was still engaging in judgment, still engaging in superiority, right? Still engaging in all of these binary beliefs where I found virtue in occupying one side of the binary. Anyway, so my experiences from that moment onward, all of our experiences come together to weave the tapestry that eventually becomes our wisdom, right? But it was these years of teaching that put me into right relationship with storytelling, and the understanding that perspective is everything, and no one has a monopoly on the truth. And that's really hard. That was a really hard truth to come back home with and to start teaching in American schools with, because we teach the tenets of white supremacy, honestly. We teach one right way. And even if we don't intend that messaging as we're reading, because our focus is on standardized testing where there's only one right answer, that is the purpose. Hey, Stafford Beer taught me the purpose of a system is what it does. And our system is really successful in that hierarchical belief system that externalizes our sovereignty, externalizes our authority, and gives it to someone else who we deem to be superior to us. It's one of the reasons why the United States, the culture of the United States, is so riddled with competition. You go to networking events and you meet people, and the first question is, what do you do? And how you answer that question determines how the rest of the conversation goes, determines whether the person's face lights up. It's this like, and I'm not painting with a broad brush. I'm just, from my experience, I've had jobs where people kind of light up. When I left teaching, I became a flight attendant. And whenever I tell people I'm a flight attendant, they're like, oh my God, what a wonderful job. And they live in their fantasy of what they think my life must be like. Baby, it's not like that. So anyway, I'm a web walker. I don't really claim a prognosis, but I allow my neurodivergence to play, and I trust my field to drop in whatever needs to be said next. But I flew with Delta for 5 years, almost 5 years. I very recently quit because what's the word I'm looking for? This pathology of storytelling that we have in the United States has reached this point where I have to distill the things that I have learned in the form of creative entrepreneurship, because it is our relationship with story that determines what kind of future we choose to occupy in the next 7 generations. Every time I left a system of belonging, I started out in the church, in this very tight-knit, very extreme sect of Baptist beliefs. And I say extreme because the women in my life were rigidly held into roles and performances that were appropriate. I didn't wear pants until I was 14 years old, and I was the one who had to be like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And so the roles were so clearly defined, and if the role is clearly defined, then it's very easy to live in that binary of, are you doing a good job at this role, or are you doing a bad job at this role? And it's one of the reasons why the conservative community is so addicted to a binary, because if you don't know what your role is, how do you know you're doing a good job? Then how do you know someone else is doing a bad job? And it becomes part of that externalized authority system that I was just talking about. So queerness is such a threat to those ways of thinking. But as I have walked away from systems of belonging to which I did not belong, it allowed my soul to get a little bit louder and speak a little bit clearer through my vessel every time that I left. But I reached this point of frustration because I left the church thinking that the answer of truth would be found in school. And so I dedicated myself to academia, and all I wanted was to be a teacher like my dad. And lo and behold, I reached this point in academia where the stories that we tell were also rooted in the same systems of hierarchy and domination and control, hoping to keep those stories kind of monopolized. Because the purpose of a system is what it does. And the purpose of our systems is to produce people who believe someone else knows more than them and really makes a good worker. And I'm not painting with a broad brush. Of course, our country produces beautiful, wonderful, smart, brilliant, innovative people. But most of the brilliant people who rise to the tops of their fields are still following the protocol that they are taught is normalized within that field. We are a nation that is so allergic to nuance, to queerness, to any sort of alteration of the approved narrative, because it threatens the flow of our money and our capital. All of the stories, I taught American literature, and I got called into the principal's office like one of the bad kids, because I was making my own curriculum. I had tried to refuse to teach the same stories that I had to unlearn when I went to China. And so I wanted to imbue in my students this like open narrative of what the United States can be, what it could be, but also telling the truth of what it has been up to this point. And trying to destabilize a system from within the system. The systems they're crumbling, yes, but like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. When you're within the system and you're trying to change it from the inside, that is what leads to chronic burnout. So when I became a flight attendant in 2020 was when I got hired, which was funny, right? In the pandemic when we were all forced to sit at home. But teaching had driven me into a health crisis of chronic burnout. And so it was great to be able to quit my job and then pause before my flight attendant career started. But when I started flying, I found out that so many people come into the field of flight attending from other helping jobs. So many teachers, so many nurses, a lot of hospitality people come in, a lot of Disney people, and police officers. Like, there are so many helping branches of society that appeal to the empathetic, the highly sensitive, the spiritually fucking tapped in. And they magnetize people of like, this is where you come to change the world. And those systems suck in those beautiful, talented, mystical, powerful people, tempting them with the ability to help change the world, only to burn out their beautiful nervous systems with all the resistance that they meet. We call them flaws in the system, but the purpose of a system is what it does. And our systems exist to protect the status quo. Whew. I need some tea. Today it is a turmeric latte with blue butterfly pea flower for my nervous system. Anyway, so this transition that I'm making in my life right now is another example of purging the stories of a system that were influencing the choices I was making. And now stepping into this future of creative entrepreneurship and particularly guidance. I can't even say I have developed my lived experience and my relationship with the unseen. Because we're all tapped into a collective consciousness. I wholeheartedly believe that the ideas that come to me are not mine. I do not have possession over these ideas. They are gifts. They are invitations from a larger collective consciousness. I'm thinking right now about Prince and Michael Jackson, saying one of them was talking about the other one, and they were talking about their creative process. And one of them said, if I have an idea for a song, I have to get up and write it right then. Otherwise, I know spirit will send it to the other one. And I think that that's a really cute story to talk about how we can envision this collective consciousness, but without the competition, right? So when thoughts and ideas come to me, I want to consider myself to be a steward of their growth rather than an owner of them. Again, going back to that hierarchy, the future that we are being asked to bring into being is one of biophilia, which means loving life, loving the way that things grow. And when you plant things in soil, they don't always come up at all, number one. Sometimes they don't grow at all. And sometimes they don't grow in the timing that you expect. You can't control it. So biophilia is about embracing the way that life organically structures itself and replicates itself, stepping back from this imperial drive to dominate and force and coerce and extract. So throughout the lessons that I've learned in my life, every layer of something falling away, a relationship that doesn't work out, a friendship that breaks up, a job that feels like it's starting to kill you, all of these things are opportunities to change our relationship with how we perceive death and the attention we give to our own beings in embracing life. So I'd like to tell you that my methodology is called Ecosomalinguistics. And it has much to do with storytelling, the sense of home or environment that a person holds central to their being, and how that language and that sense of home determine the sense of safety and adventure within a human body. So this process the name came much later than the process. The process is, how did I take inventory of the stories that were informing my behavior? How did I rectify when the stories I was living was conflicting with what I was experiencing in the external world? And the processes that I have undergone to bring coherence back to my body and discover my inner authority of what truth is for me. I'm going to give the example of, one of my first days in China, I went to a 7-Eleven just to get some stuff. And this man came up behind me as I was waiting in line, and I could feel his breath on my neck. He was so close to me. And I turned around and was like, "What are you doing?" In English, because I didn't speak any Mandarin. And he was like, "Huh?" Everybody in the shop was looking at me like, "What's wrong with you?" And my body was experiencing danger signals because in my home, in my my environment, coming within an arm's length of someone is intimate. And if you are not on an intimate basis with that person, then it's threatening. And so my body was undergoing all of the threat responses of like, ding, 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 we're in trouble. Someone means us harm. And I looked around at the responses of everyone, and I cognitively recognized that I was not in danger, but I didn't understand why my body was freaking out. So I had to sit with myself after the fact, especially as, you know, as I was making my way home. You get on a bus, you get on a train. China is so densely populated and has such a different outlook on the individual versus the collective, that the idea of a personal bubble doesn't exist there. If you like, every molecule of air that your skin does not occupy is fair game, baby. Like, it is. And so I had to get in deeper touch with my body to find out where these like safe distances were stored and how to teach my body a different version of safety based on where we were now. Because her nervous system was entirely tuned to a southern U.S. environment. But as I have lived my life, I have made a practice of getting closer with my nervous system, which brings you closer to God, if you didn't know. And it took me years to even be able to say the word God again because of how hard and how just how much the concept of God was corrupted when it was taught to me. But if God doesn't work for you, I like to say the unified oneness, the unfractured all. That's one of my favorites. Source energy, the universe, the Tao, because I do study Taoism, and I've collected so many stories from all of my travels and from so many wonderful people that I've met around the world. And I find that what we are missing in our literacy education is an opportunity to reorganize our stories without necessarily having to leave home and move to another country. So, put simply, Ecosomalinguistics is a literacy framework for reorganizing our psychic architecture, taking inventory of what is, and becoming stewards, co-authors of what comes next, what kind of lives we actually want to live, what kind of systems actually serve life, instead of keeping us in survival mode, being extracted from, and thus looking to extract from others because we're so afraid that our needs won't be met. Oh my God, if you stayed this long, just give me a little blue butterfly in the comments, because ain't no such thing as coincidences. Thank you.